Picture this. You're 45, maybe 50. You've built a career, maybe raised children, navigated decades of relationships and professional challenges. You've always known you were different, but you've also been told you're successful, high-functioning, and doing just fine. Then something breaks. Not dramatically, more like a slow unraveling. Skills you've relied on for decades start to feel unreliable. Your ability to navigate social situations, to organize your thoughts, to tolerate everyday sensory experiences, all of it begins to slip away like water through your fingers. You're told it's stress, burnout, maybe a midlife crisis, but you know it's something deeper. Welcome back to Neuro Rebel, the podcast where we refuse to accept simple explanations to complex neurological experiences. I'm Anita, your host, late diagnosed autistic adult who discovered that sometimes our greatest professional accomplishments can mask our most profound personal struggles. For those joining our community for the first time, this is where we bring academic rigor to lived experience, where we challenge the sanitized narratives about neurodivergence, and where we explore the realities that don't make it into feel-good social media content. We're bilingual, we're bicultural, and we are unapologetically committed to the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Today, we're confronting one of autism's most misunderstood phenomena, skill regression and late diagnosed adults. This isn't about children losing language. This is about competent adults who suddenly find themselves unable to perform tasks that once felt automatic. It's about the devastating experience of watching your cognitive abilities seemingly deteriorate, often without understanding why. The research tells us that late diagnosed individuals, particularly women and people of color, represent a massive gap in our understanding of autism across the lifespan. We know that many of these individuals experience what researchers are now calling autistic burnout, a state of physical, emotional, and cognitive exhaustion that can lead to what appears to be skill regression, but is actually protective shutdown. Yet, despite affecting potentially millions of people, the experience remains largely invisible in mainstream autism discourse. Why? Because it doesn't fit the narrative of autism as a childhood condition. Because it challenges our assumptions about adult competency, and because the people experiencing it have been too exhausted to advocate for themselves. Today, I'm honored to speak with psychologist Irma Lira, a clinical psychologist who understands this phenomenon both from a professional and a deeply personal perspective. As someone who received her own autism diagnosis later in her life, Irma brings a unique dual lens to our conversation: the clinical expertise to understand the research and the lived experience to know what it feels like when your world quietly falls apart. We'll explore the emotional archaeology of renaming a lifetime of experiences through the autistic lens, the professional challenges of being a mental health professional who discovers she needed the very support she provides others, and the practical realities of rebuilding life after diagnoses, including learning to recognize and prevent the cycles of burnout that can trigger skill regression. This is a conversation about resilience, but not toxic positivity kind. This is about the messy, complicated work of untangling decades of masking and self-advocacy that begins not with inspiration, but with understanding. So settle in, grab whatever helps you feel grounded, and let's explore the hidden landscape of late diagnosed autism with someone who's navigated both professionally and personally. Welcome, Irma. We are so excited to have you here in the Neuro Rebel podcast. I can't tell you how excited we are to have the opportunity to chat with you today about some really interesting topics. So, welcome all our listeners. Irma Lira, a clinical psychologist here in Playa del Carmen.
Thank you, Anita, for the opportunity of being here. This is a very special subject for me, not only as a therapist, but as a neurodivergent person.
Thank you so much. So, today, as I mentioned, the topic is going to be what the implications are resulting from this late diagnosis. So, tell us a little bit about what is late diagnosis? What does that mean?
Well, late diagnosis is when you, as an adult, find out for yourself most of the time that you have a neurodivergent condition. Like when life gets hard, or maybe you are struggling with a job or finding a job, or you recently lost a person that was important to you, it can feel like a deep state of depression, but sometimes it's just burnout. And autistic burnout or neurodivergent burnout feels different than a neurotypical burnout because it's your life energy is so depleted that it's so hard to push back. It's not like, oh, I'm taking a week off so I can recover. Like taking a vacation is not going to improve what you're feeling.
So, how does one arrive at the moment where you say, I need to find out professionally, I need to get a diagnosis? How does that happen in your experience in clinical practice?
Well, for a lot of people, they go into therapy for these things that we've been talking about, like life crisis. And usually, when you go to a therapist and they are knowledgeable in the subject, they can let you know that you need an evaluation. They can make an evaluation or an assessment, or you can go to a psychiatrist or a neurologist. But in my experience, not only knowing that you have the condition, but also helps knowing how the condition is manifested in you. If you're having doubts, now social media is a good source of information, at least for self-diagnosed, to say, like, maybe this sounds a little bit like me. But if you have suspicions that you might be in a condition, going to a professional always helps.
One of the interesting things I found out is that almost 80% of late diagnosed adults and beyond adolescents are women. I mean, what's going on there? Tell us a little bit about this bias and this gender bias that now they've identified as the female phenotype for neurodivergence. What's going on there?
Well, I'm going to tell you first, as a therapist, I worked clinically with autistic patients, but mostly men. The manifestation in men and women is super different, not only when they're children, but also when they're adults. And also, another aspect that contributes a lot to all the misinformation that there is about autistic women. Like 30 years ago, people wouldn't even think that there would be an autistic woman. But nowadays that we have more information, we can know that autistic women mask a lot, or neurodivergent women mask a lot. And that has also to do with how we're socialized when we're children. We are taught that we need to be quiet, respectful, delicate, not to be moving around a lot or playing a lot or just jumping everywhere. You need to sit tight and look at people in the eyes and smile. All of those aspects that you may perceive as an autistic child or as an ADHD child or gifted are kind of taught to repress. So women are great actresses. Neurodivergent women, I think we're the biggest actresses because we're suppressing and repressing most of our needs in terms of steaming or in terms of what is uncomfortable or even disgusting.
As the saying goes, I have been many people in this lifetime. By the time we reach the diagnosis, we don't really know who we are anymore because of a lifetime of masking. What is your opinion with respect to this gender bias and this female phenotype? The research suggests that this has happened because the studies of autism and other neurodivergences have been performed primarily by observing male subjects and male children. So women have largely been excluded from the process, which have led to professionals who are not up to date on autism themes.
It's very unfortunate that we have to go through this because female bodies are so different than male bodies in everything, like chemically, hormonally, like even the response to pain is so different in a male than a female. So by studying conditions or illness or pathologies in men, they're leaving out 50% of the population's needs.
So, what do you think is one of the biggest systemic problems, if you will, with this issue of late diagnoses and women in particular with respect to mental health professionals? Is it a lack of education, training, knowledge? Where is the gap in your opinion?
I think also the ideas that we have about gender are influencing how doctors treat us because historically we are thought in women like that was so wrong. So when women approach a physician that is not knowledgeable in this subject, think they're exaggerating. There's a lot of also autoimmune disease in autistic women like fibromyalgia and lupus and arthritis, like things that have a high level of pain and they are often dismissed. Or if they go to a psychiatrist, they get multiple diagnoses before even thinking about could you be autistic? Could you be neurodivergent? They tell you that you have bipolar disorder or borderline personality disorder or severe depression, but they never seem to think that we might be in the spectrum or that we might be gifted or that we might be with ADHD.
Yes. I can vouch for that. I have a suitcase full of misdiagnoses. I was diagnosed at 52, so up until that time, I definitely was many things to many people. And it's really, really unfortunate. What is your suggestion to begin repairing the systemic bias?
I think it has to be an effort in many levels, including the personal responsibility as a health provider. Like you need to be actualized, like you need to study, you need to see the new paradigms in neurodivergency and what's going on in life. Like when I went to school, I studied my base is psychoanalysis. So it was seen as a misconnection between mother and child. So basically, your mother was at fault instead of being a genetic trait that runs around in families like, I don't know, like curly hair or blue eyes.
Right, right. Exactly. I mean, we don't talk about blue-eyed people as having a pigment deficiency, right? We just don't. So why do we talk about different thinking styles as having a deficient form of thinking? It's very curious. Language has a lot to do with it. I think that's where I agree with you. The neurodiversity paradigm is critical in understanding through a new lens what all these, let's call them modern, for lack of a better term, because we've always been there. This is a brand new thing. We can look at these issues, chronic stress and autistic burnout, and triggers skill regression. Skill regression is a problem, right, with late diagnosed adults. I understand. Tell us a little bit about that. What is skill and why does it manifest in late diagnosed neurodivergence?
Well, since we're talking about masking, most of our social skills are masking skills. Like we learn to socialize, following cues or imitating, but it's not like it's assimilated or comprehended. It's like replayed, like we're playing a part. So all of those skills, and also for some of us, our brains don't work in the same way of executive function. So it's difficult to organize, to plan, to even if you were able to organize and were able to plan, to follow on the steps of your plans is difficult because it has to do with your organic functions, but also with your level of stress. So, environment plays a key role because they can make you go super regress super bad, or they can help you get out of burnout. We now know that you're not a little bit autistic or a lot of autistic or ADHD or gifted, or you just have different needs of support. And those needs of support can vary throughout life. Like it's not like if you are given a diagnosis and you have a level 2 of need of support, it doesn't mean that it's going to stay there. Maybe you went to have your diagnosis when you were going through a crisis and you were in burnout. To be able to get out of there, it's not going to be a 7-week vacation, but also a joint effort with therapy sessions and sometimes medication, but also with help from the environment, because we're going to have good days and bad days. But if our environment or like expect regression is going to stay there because it creates a constant state of distress and feeling insufficient or feeling inadequate.
And is this as a direct consequence? I mean, it's interesting what the complex psychological interplay here that as a consequence of a late diagnoses that, well, as a consequence of obtaining a late diagnosis, a lot of people go into burnout or experience skill regression, or it triggers skill regression. Why do you think that is?
Well, I don't think it like because you got the diagnosis, you got this, but probably by the time you got the diagnosis, you were so into a burnout state that you are going to have to take time to get out of it. I'm still able to do all those things, but if I'm thinking maybe I can't, or that I don't understand social situation that well, then the next time that I'm faced with one, I'm going to feel super incompetent, where it's not like so. Having moral support, but also having a place in therapy where you can just kind of talk about it and order things around helps a lot to be able to feel more secure with yourself, or more with more self-esteem, so you can get out of that skill regression.
So here's where therapy becomes critical, right? For people navigating the late diagnosis path, seeking assistance and help from therapy. I personally found it incredibly helpful. What would you recommend? Well, how would you recommend people approach this issue?
I recommend that you approach a therapist that also is knowledgeable in the paradigm and types of therapy that are not there to change you or who you are, like cognitive therapy that sometimes is there to change certain behaviors. It's probably not the best way because you need to make peace with yourself. Having a diagnosis as an adult sometimes leads to grieving process where you have to let the person you thought you were go to be able to be created and be accepted. So it's kind of like the death of the ego or the death of the self that no longer serves you. Like take away the mask, but first, before doing it with others, you have to do it with yourself. So you have to kind of grieve that person that you were. So ideally, a process would be where you can be understood, where you feel safe to talk about these things, where you're not pressured with a timeline or with a lot of tasks, because this requires like a deep dive into the self, and also that are based in systems of emotional regulation, because many of our problems come from uh, having to process all this information and then all the emotional information that comes with it. So all of that, or need to have skills to be processed in order with these emotional regulation processes where you can just feel your feelings and then give them a name and then link them to actions.
So there's definitely a grief process involved in this post diagnosis at the late stage. Talk a little bit about that process. What is the dual like? I mean, why do we experience as a, in a way, as a death of the former self?
Well, since you were crying, you weren't aware that you had this false self to begin with. Now that you see the false self and also see the cost that it takes for you to sustain that self, you wonder, do I have to keep doing this? Am I really this way? Do I want to keep this kind of relationships? So it involves all of the areas in our life, how we deal with our jobs, how we deal with our loved ones, how we deal with ourselves, and then the levels of demand that we have towards us. So you kind of have to let go of everything that you knew about yourself. So it's kind of not even reconstruction, but just like the phoenix burn. You have to let it all burn and then from the ashes rise again.
Right. It's an incredibly stressful and painful process for many people. I know it was for me. How did you live the process of finding out you had these three conditions all at once, two of which are completely opposed to each other and their needs and demands? Share with us and our listeners what you, as a clinical psychologist, as a professional, and as a human being, what that process was like for you.
It was definitely a difficult one. I started this process. I was working a lot. I like to work a lot. But at some point, I had kidney problems. So I was going through physical pain a lot. And at the same time, in all this work that I started knowing a lot of autistic women, adult autistic women, most of them diagnosed late in life. And they were all sharing their experiences, not only through the diagnosis, but also in childhood. And I kind of always knew that I had ADHD, but never how it manifested in me. So I started with the autistic diagnosis. So I knew that accompanying the process with compassion and patience was what needed. But then confronting that process with myself was a completely different task because right now I had to start treating myself like that. But I felt like I didn't have any skills. I had a lot of self doubt. I couldn't, or I feared going out in public, feeling exposed, talking to people. I've always been able to do all these things, but after my physical health got better, I went to have a test for ADHD. I had these three things that are kind of pulling me in different directions because the need for order and the need for structure that comes with the autism, it's completely destroyed by the chaos from ADHD, and I have complex ADHD. So it means like I'm inattentive and I'm hyperactive. So, and knowing that I was gifted helped a little bit because I felt since I regressed a lot, I'm having since a couple of years from now more difficulties reading and concentrating. So I was feeling, I don't know, like it impacted my self esteem. So right now I'm in the process of self accepting and self assurance and feeling good about myself. At the beginning, I didn't want anyone to know that I was autistic because I thought people was going to look at me differently. And right now, I'm like, hey, I'm here and I'm proud.
Good for you. We need more of that. What has helped you recover from the burnout and from the post diagnosis? I mean, like once you figure out, it's like, oh my God, now what? What has helped you reintegrate yourself?
Well, it's been a long journey, but definitely sleeping. That's a game changer. I don't think I've ever slept like I'm sleeping now. Sleeping changed everything, especially like in your nervous system, but also like going inside and looking at myself and going back to my childhood experiences with a different look, with more compassion, talking about it with my friends, talking about it with colleagues, receiving empathy from them, asking for help. That was a game changer too. It cost me a lot. I've been very independent since a very young age. So being able to feel vulnerable was definitely a big one. But I have the best friends that I could have. I have my son, I have my partner. So I have a lot of people that are rooting for me, and that helps a lot. Speak freely with your loved ones of who you are and what you need changes too. Also, I had to kind of look at the way I was working and started putting
Start
some order
changing a
there.
few things.
Yes.
Start changing some patterns. One of the things that you do very well in your nonprofit focuses on empowering neurodivergent adults in society and education and the workforce. Tell us a little bit about what is happening at the corporate level, especially with late diagnosed adults in the workforce. What is happening there, and why did you choose to specialize in that area, or one of your many specialties, but in particular, the training and education in that context?
Well, this project started after many experiences with patients, but there was one patient that really marked me. 25-year-old woman who her life dream is to be independent and self-sufficient, and she hasn't been able to do so. So in the quest of doing that, he went to a job interview at one of these stores that sell like Chinese products. And the girl that was interviewing her was kind of stressing her out with all these questions and looking profoundly at her. They didn't allow her to be accompanied by her mother in the interview, so that stressed her too. And when she started to struggle replying to her questions instead of having compassion or empathy, she started treating her like she was deaf or worse. So that definitely gave her a crisis, and she just ran away from the interview. So that kind of broke my heart, because I think although I have always been able to be independent and self-sufficient and being able to work. So it really put me into the direction of I need to do something to change this. And the power that I have is whatever I can just share with them, whatever knowledge I can share, so they can see that this girl would have been like the best manager of the store. Just don't put her in the front with people. But she would have been like the best in inventory and in ordering the store, because she's so ordinate and she's so neat, that she would have been a great employee. And she only wanted an opportunity to feel sufficient and to feel valued and to contribute to her family finances. So I think it's very important. And also, like, all of the resources, private and municipal or state resources. And when you're 17, so it's like you're magically cured from autism or whatever condition you have. And it's not like that. Like, after 17, the real struggle continues, because before that, if you had your family, you were contained and supported. But then after you're 18, starts getting hard. And then even if you have all this family support, sometimes at some point your family is not going to be with you. So you need to have the possibility to work and to be able to be independent. And also, those two are linked to mental health. If you don't feel like you can contribute actively to your family, to your society, you're going to be super depressed.
That's a startling statistic. I was really shocked to find out that, well, particularly in Mexico here, I don't know about other places, although the infantilization of autism is global. But the support ends at age 17. So it's not like we magically disappear, right? We don't become neurotypical overnight. And I think that's a really interesting question of public policy and education, what happens. And so That is so great that you are stepping in to provide a service that is sorely needed and just tragically lacking in this area and throughout Mexico. Corporations, employers, if you're listening, please start educating how to incorporate neurodivergent people into the workforce. Because, Irma, tell us why that's important. What have you found in terms of the research and the numbers? Why is it important to incorporate neurodivergent people? Aside from the fact that we are humans and we have a human right to work, beyond that basic declaration, why is it important in the corporate context?
Well, for many reasons. First, 1 in every 32 people is neurodivergent. So we're here. We're definitely here, and there's more of us than you think. But also, 80% of neurodivergent people is either unemployed or employed, like underemployed. Like they have more abilities than they're getting paid to do. And that creates also a void in the companies because they need a workforce and they need people who are committed, who are responsible, and they're not finding the workforce that is going to be able to deliver all that. Like neurodivergent people are looking for a place where they can stay, where they can grow. For many autistic people, they don't like change. So if you offer a good job environment, they probably can work there forever. They are looking for a place where they can feel useful, use their abilities, and their characteristics are awesome. Good analytic thinking, a lot of resources when it comes to problem solving, quick thinking, organization, planning when it comes to autistics, but also like being able to detect patterns. So if you want to improve your processes, then definitely hire neurodivergent people because not only you're going to see an impact in reducing the rotation of personnel, that it's a big problem here in the Ribera Maya with hotels, but you can actually see the benefits in the long run.
That's fascinating. And thank you for the work you do in that area. So, as a neurodivergent late diagnosed woman, what can you share that is personal and that is, let's call it, embalming of the heart?
I think if you have the possibility to get a diagnosis, do it. You owe it to yourself and your inner child. They need the validation. They need to feel reassured. The connection you get from yourself and your feelings and your needs can help you lead a more healthy and balanced life. And before going through the process of diagnose and acceptance, it's like a caterpillar. And it's difficult. Like, obviously, for the caterpillar to become a butterfly is super difficult. And it's kind of the same to break that cocoon of who you thought you were. But afterwards, so to say, this is me and this is what I can give.
That's beautiful. Now, what about self diagnosis? I mean, how do we approach self diagnosis if we have no access to a formal diagnosis?
Well, definitely helps. And with the criteria of DSM-5, and it's going to tell you that you might be in the condition, but at some point, if you do have the possibility to know how the condition is manifesting in you, do it. Now, all you have is self diagnosed, do it too. And then maybe approach a professional that can help you with the process of integrating all that information.
Well, I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this conversation we've had. I think a lot of people are going to benefit by the information and wisdom you've shared. And I want to thank you on behalf of Neuro Rebel and all of our listeners for taking the time to spend with us here today and share with us all of you that you've shared.
Thank you for inviting me. For me, it's a pleasure to be here. You've always been a role model for me. So being here and being able to share this project with you, it's awesome. Thank you.
I am so thankful to Irma for bringing such nuance and vulnerability to this conversation. Her insights about the intersection of professional identity and personal discovery really illuminate how complex this journey can be. For those of you listening and have recognized yourselves in Irma's story, I want you to know that your experiences are valid, your struggles are real, and the process of late discovery, whether through formal diagnoses or through self-exploration, is an act of profound courage. The research is clear that late diagnosed autism, particularly in women and marginalized communities, represents one of the most significant gaps in our current understanding of the autism spectrum. When Irma talks about skill regression during burnout, she's describing a phenomenon that lacks adequate research funding, clinical recognition, and social support. If you're questioning whether you might be autistic, remember what Irma shared about the importance of professional guidance while also trusting your own expertise about your life. Self-exploration through reputable resources can be a valuable first step, but it works best when combined with clinical support that understands autism in adults, particularly for those of us who have spent decades masking our neurological differences. Thank you for joining us in this conversation that challenges easy answers and embraces difficult truths. And if today's episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it, not because misery loves company, but because understanding shared experience can be the first step toward healing. You can find full transcripts, research citations, and additional resources at neurorebelpodcast.com. Find us on social media at NeuroRebelPodcast, and if you have questions, please write to us at neurorebelpodcast@gmail.com. Remember, your brain isn't broken. The systems around you might be, but with understanding, community, and appropriate support, you can build a life that works with your neurological reality rather than against it. I'm Anita, and this has been NeuroRebel. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep being authentically, beautifully yourself.